Welcome back, guys, to Wrong Turn Horror. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 scary Halloween horror stories from small-town America. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new horror story. Tonight's tales come from the quiet corners of America, where jack-o'-lanterns glow on lonely porches, the streets fall silent after midnight, and something ancient still walks beneath the autumn moon. Grab your blanket, turn off the lights, and let the darkness take over. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now, because tonight, time doesn't matter. Every Halloween, the small town of Maple Hollow felt like something out of a postcard. Orange leaves blanketed the streets, laughter echoed through the cul-de-sacs, and porch lights twinkled like tiny stars under the cool October moon. But this year was different. The air felt heavier, colder. The leaves seemed darker, almost as if they'd been soaked in something red. For 12-year-old Danny Miller, Halloween was everything. Candy, costumes, and staying up late. It was his favorite night of the year. His mom always told him not to go past Crescent Road, where the houses thinned and the woods began. That's where the town ends, she'd say, and where the stories start. Danny didn't believe in ghost stories. He'd heard them all about the old house at the end of Crescent, the one where a little boy vanished in the 1980s while trick-or-treating. His friends dared him to go there every year, and every year he laughed it off. But this Halloween, he decided he'd prove them wrong. As the night deepened, he and his best friends, Jake and Mia, darted from house to house, pillowcases filling with candy. The streets began to empty, the giggles fading into whispers as porch lights flickered out one by one. The moon climbed higher, casting silver shadows across the sidewalks. "Last stop?" Jake asked, breathing hard, pointing toward the end of Crescent Road. Danny grinned. "You scared?" Mia frowned. "That's the old Carver place. My mom said no one's lived there in 40 years. "Exactly," Danny said. Free candy. The three of them walked down the narrow road. The laughter behind them died completely. All they could hear was the crunch of their shoes on gravel and the whisper of leaves moving in the trees. The Carver house appeared slowly out of the fog, tall, crooked, its porch sagging, windows black and hollow like empty eyes. A single jack-o'-lantern burned faintly on the step, its grin warped and dripping wax. "Someone must live here," Jake muttered. "Look, they left the light on." Danny took a breath and climbed the steps. His hand shook as he knocked on the door. "Trick or treat," he shouted, his voice echoing silence. Then, slowly, the door creaked open. A faint orange glow spilled out, and a voice, soft, almost like a whisper, said, "Come in. There's plenty for everyone." Mia grabbed his arm. "Danny, no." But he laughed nervously and peeked inside. The hallway was dim, lit by flickering candles. Shadows danced along the walls, where faded portraits of people with blank faces stared down at him. The air smelled of pumpkin, dust, and something else, something sweet and metallic. "I'll just grab one piece," Danny said. He stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath his sneakers. On a small table sat a bowl filled with candy, perfectly wrapped, shiny, untouched. He reached for it, but then noticed something odd. Each candy was carved with tiny letters, names. One of them said Ethan Carver. Another said Lucy. Another said Mia. He froze. Mia, it's your name. What? She called from the porch, but before she could move, the door slammed shut between them. Danny screamed and pounded on the wood, but it wouldn't budge. The candles flickered violently, throwing shadows that twisted into shapes, small, childlike figures with hollow eyes and stitched mouths. You shouldn't have come here, the whisper said again, this time closer. The carvers love Halloween. Danny turned and saw them. 3 figures standing at the end of the hall, children in old-fashioned costumes, their faces pale, their eyes black. One held a rusted trick-or-treat pail. Another dragged a plastic pumpkin that left a trail of blood. Who are you? He stammered. The smallest one smiled, revealing broken, yellow teeth. We used to live here. We came for candy too. The air turned freezing cold. His flashlight died. He backed away, tripping over something soft, a mask. It looked exactly like his own. He lifted it, and inside was a name written in the same neat letters. Danny Miller. He dropped it and ran for the door. But the hallway stretched longer and longer, the exit getting smaller with every step. Behind him, the whispers grew louder. Trick or treat, trick or treat, until they became a chant. He screamed for help, but no one answered. The front door finally burst open, and Danny stumbled out onto the porch. His friends were gone. The street was empty. The jack-o'-lantern flickered weakly beside him, its grin wider now. He ran home, heart pounding, candy bag clutched in his hand. When he reached his front door, his mom opened it, her face pale. Danny, where were you? It's after midnight. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His voice was gone. She pulled him inside, hugging him tightly. You scared me half to death, she whispered. He wanted to tell her everything, the voices, the kids, the names. But when he looked down at his candy bag, his blood ran cold. It wasn't candy inside anymore. It was dirt. Black, wet dirt, and a small pumpkin carved with his name. His mum didn't notice. Let's get you cleaned up, she said softly. But as she led him down the hall, she stopped. Danny, what's that on your neck? He touched it, a small piece of twine tied tight, like part of a scarecrow's stitching. He tried to untie it, but it burned his skin. When he looked up at the mirror by the door, his reflection didn't move. It just smiled back at him with hollow eyes. The next morning, his mum went to wake him for school, but his bed was empty. The window was open, cold air drifting in. On the pillow lay his mask and a single candy, wrapped in shiny orange foil. The wrapper had one word on it: welcome, that Halloween. A new bowl appeared on the carver porch, full of fresh candy, each piece engraved with a new name, Danny Miller. And now, every October 31st, when the fog rolls over Maple Hollow and the night grows to still, people say they see him, a boy in a torn costume, standing at the end of Crescent Road, holding an old pillowcase, whispering softly through the dark, trick or treat. So if you ever find yourself walking home late on Halloween, and you see a kid standing alone under a flickering streetlight, his bag open, waiting, do not answer him. Do not give him candy. Do not even look his way, because it might not be a kid at all. It might just be Danny Miller waiting to invite you to your final trick-or-treat. In the quiet farming town of Millfield, Halloween was simple: pumpkins on porches, hay rides under the stars, and the rustle of dry cornstalks in the wind. But at the edge of town stood an old farm, long abandoned after the Fields family vanished one Halloween night 30 years ago. The only thing left behind was their Scarecrow, still standing tall in the front field, its straw-stuffed body slouched but intact, its head a rotting burlap sack with buttons for eyes. Locals said it moved sometimes, though no one ever stayed long enough to find out. That October, Eli Grant, a 17-year-old with a love for dares and late-night thrill-seeking, decided he'd prove the stories wrong. "It's just a pile of straw," he told his friends, laughing as they sat around a dying bonfire in the woods. The group, his girlfriend, Sarah, and their friends Tommy and Becca, had grown up hearing the tale. How Old Man Fields supposedly made a deal with something dark to protect his crops. And when the crops failed, that something took his family instead. The Scarecrow, they said, was the mark of that bargain, cursed to watch over the land forever. "Bet you won't spend 5 minutes in that field," Tommy teased, throwing another log into the flames. Eli grinned. "I'll stay all night." They thought he was bluffing, but an hour later, they were parked at the edge of the abandoned field farm. The wind carried the faint smell of mold and soil, and the cornstalks swayed like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The Scarecrow stood in the center, its arms spread wide, its head tilted slightly, as if listening. "Creepy," Sarah muttered, hugging herself. Eli smirked, pulling out his flashlight. "I'll prove it's fake. You guys watch from the car." He stepped into the cornfield, the dry stalks crunching under his boots. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. Even the crickets stopped singing. His flashlight beam landed on the Scarecrow, tall, still, lifeless. Its clothes hung loose, tattered flannel and denim, and its head sagged slightly to the side. But its button eyes seemed to gleam in the light. "See." Eli called out, waving back toward his friends. "It's just a Scarecrow." He circled it, poking it with a stick. Straw spilled out from a hole in its chest. Then he noticed something strange, a faint smell of decay, like meat gone bad. Frowning, he leaned closer. The burlap around the Scarecrow's neck was stained dark. When he lifted the fabric, he saw the edge of something pale beneath it, not straw, but skin. He stumbled back, heart pounding. What the hell? The Scarecrow's head turned. Just a twitch, a subtle, cracking sound as it shifted to face him. Eli froze, the flashlight shaking in his hand. Then its arm creaked upward, straw falling from the sleeve like dust. He ran from the car. Sarah saw the flashlight jerking wildly through the corn, Eli's screams swallowed by the wind. She leaped out, calling his name, but by the time she reached the edge of the field, the light was gone. Only the whisper of the stalks remained. Tommy and Becca followed, shouting into the dark. The three of them huddled together, their breaths white in the cold air. "We need to go," Becca whispered. But Sarah wouldn't leave. "I'm not leaving him." Against every ounce of fear, she went in. The corn closed around her like walls, the stalks scraping against her jacket. She could hear something ahead, a soft dragging sound, like fabric sliding through the dirt. Then the light reappeared. Eli's flashlight, lying on the ground. When she picked it up, the beam caught something hanging in front of her. It was the Scarecrow. But now, it was different. It stood taller, its arms twisted at new angles. Its head was fresh, the burlap tighter, the stains darker, and around its neck hung Eli's necklace, the one she'd given him that summer. Sarah screamed, stumbling backward. The Scarecrow's mouth, a stitched black slit, began to open. The burlap stretched, tearing at the seams as something wet and red gleamed beneath. She ran, the corn clawing at her arms, her flashlight flickering. Behind her, she heard the sound of footsteps, heavy, dragging, uneven. The rustle of the stalks grew louder, faster, until she burst out of the field and collapsed by the car. Tommy and Becca helped her inside, slamming the doors. "Where's Eli?" Becca cried. Sarah's voice shook. It wasn't straw anymore. They peeled away down the dirt road. But when Tommy glanced in the rearview mirror, his stomach turned. At the edge of the field, standing in the headlights, was the Scarecrow. Only now it was wearing Eli's clothes. The police searched the next day but found nothing. No footprints. No flashlight. No sign of Eli. The Scarecrow was gone, too. For weeks, the town whispered. Some said Eli ran away. Others said the field curse had claimed him. But on Halloween night, the following year, the Scarecrow returned. It appeared at the same spot in the field, facing the road, this time with a new head, a new jacket, and something glinting around its neck. The sheriff who found it said the face looked too real, too human, and the smell coming off it was unmistakable. After that, no one dared to step foot near the field farm again. The crops grew wild, swallowing the fences and the house. But sometimes people driving past late at night claimed to see the Scarecrow move, just a little, as their headlights sweep over it. One farmer swore he saw it turn its head to watch his truck go by. Another said he saw breath fogging from beneath the burlap. And once, a kid who went looking for it on a dare came back screaming, saying it whispered his name. They say the Scarecrow doesn't scare off birds anymore. It scares off people. And if you ever find yourself driving through Millfield on Halloween night, and you see that old Scarecrow standing in the mist, don't look at it. Don't stop. Because if it turns to look back at you, it means it's looking for a new face. In the quiet farming town of Millfield, Halloween was simple. Pumpkins on porches, hay rides under the stars, and the rustle of dry corn stalks in the wind. But at the edge of town stood an old farm, long abandoned after the Fields family vanished one Halloween night 30 years ago. The only thing left behind was their Scarecrow, still standing tall in the front field, its straw-stuffed body slouched but intact, its head a rotting burlap sack with buttons for eyes. Locals said it moved sometimes, though no one ever stayed long enough to find out. That October, Eli Grant, a 17-year-old with a love for dares and later-night thrill-seeking, decided he'd prove the stories wrong. "It's just a pile of straw," he told his friends, laughing as they sat around a dying bonfire in the woods. The group, his girlfriend, Sarah, and their friends Tommy and Becca, had grown up hearing the tale. How Old Man Fields supposedly made a deal with something dark to protect his crops. And when the crops failed, that something took his family instead. The Scarecrow, they said, was the mark of that bargain, cursed to watch over the land forever. "Bet you won't spend 5 minutes in that field," Tommy teased, throwing another log into the flames. Eli grinned. "I'll stay all night." They thought he was bluffing, but an hour later, they were parked at the edge of the abandoned field farm. The wind carried the faint smell of mold and soil, and the cornstalks swayed like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The Scarecrow stood in the center, its arms spread wide, its head tilted slightly, as if listening. "Creepy," Sarah muttered, hugging herself. Eli smirked, pulling out his flashlight. "I'll prove it's fake." "You guys watch from the car." He stepped into the cornfield, the dry stalks crunching under his boots. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. Even the crickets stopped singing. His flashlight beam landed on the Scarecrow, tall, still, lifeless. Its clothes hung loose, tattered flannel and denim, and its head sagged slightly to the side. But its button eyes seemed to gleam in the light. "See." Eli called out, waving back toward his friends. "It's just a scarecrow." He circled it, poking it with a stick. Straw spilled out from a hole in its chest. Then he noticed something strange, a faint smell of decay, like meat gone bad. Frowning, he leaned closer. The burlap around the Scarecrow's neck was stained dark. When he lifted the fabric, he saw the edge of something pale beneath it, not straw, but skin. He stumbled back, heart pounding. What the hell? The Scarecrow's head turned. Just a twitch, a subtle, cracking sound as it shifted to face him. Eli froze, the flashlight shaking in his hand. Then its arm creaked upward, straw falling from the sleeve like dust. He ran from the car. Sarah saw the flashlight jerking wildly through the corn, Eli's screams swallowed by the wind. She leaped out, calling his name. But by the time she reached the edge of the field, the light was gone. Only the whisper of the stalks remained. Tommy and Becca followed, shouting into the dark. The three of them huddled together, their breaths white in the cold air. "We need to go," Becca whispered. But Sarah wouldn't leave. "I'm not leaving him." Against every ounce of fear, she went in. The corn closed around her like walls, the stalks scraping against her jacket. She could hear something ahead, a soft, dragging sound, like fabric sliding through the dirt. Then the light reappeared. Eli's flashlight, lying on the ground. When she picked it up, the beam caught something hanging in front of her. It was the Scarecrow. But now, it was different. It stood taller, its arms twisted at new angles. Its head was fresh, the burlap tighter, the stains darker, and around its neck hung Eli's necklace, the one she'd given him that summer. Sarah screamed, stumbling backward. The Scarecrow's mouth, a stitched black slit, began to open. The burlap stretched, tearing at the seams as something wet and red gleamed beneath. She ran, the corn clawing at her arms, her flashlight flickering. Behind her, she heard the sound of footsteps, heavy, dragging, uneven. The rustle of the stalks grew louder, faster, until she burst out of the field and collapsed by the car. Tommy and Becca helped her inside, slamming the doors. "Where's Eli?" Becca cried. Sarah's voice shook. It wasn't straw anymore. They peeled away down the dirt road. But when Tommy glanced in the rearview mirror, his stomach turned. At the edge of the field, standing in the headlights, was the Scarecrow. Only now it was wearing Eli's clothes. The police searched the next day but found nothing. No footprints. No flashlight. No sign of Eli. The Scarecrow was gone, too. For weeks, the town whispered. Some said Eli ran away. Others said the field curse had claimed him. But on Halloween night, the following year, the Scarecrow returned. It appeared at the same spot in the field, facing the road, this time with a new head, a new jacket, and something glinting around its neck. The sheriff who found it said the face looked too real, too human, and the smell coming off it was unmistakable. After that, no one dared to step foot near the field farm again. The crops grew wild, swallowing the fences and the house. But sometimes people driving past late at night claimed to see the Scarecrow move, just a little, as their headlights sweep over it. One farmer swore he saw it turn its head to watch his truck go by. Another said he saw breath fogging from beneath the burlap. And once, a kid who went looking for it on a dare came back screaming, saying it whispered his name. They say the Scarecrow doesn't scare off birds anymore. It scares off people. And if you ever find yourself driving through Millfield on Halloween night, and you see that old Scarecrow standing in the mist, don't look at it. Don't stop. Because if it turns to look back at you, it means it's looking for a new face. There's a small town in northern Ohio called Ashbury Hollow, tucked between two endless stretches of forest and fog. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and where everyone knows to stay indoors on Halloween night, because once the clock strikes midnight, the parade begins. It's not the kind of parade you'd ever want to see. The story goes back nearly a century, to October 31st, 1924. That year, Ashbury Hollow threw its first Halloween parade, floats, costumes, music, the whole thing. The streets were packed with families holding lanterns carved from pumpkins. But when the parade reached the old bridge, a freak accident happened. One of the floats caught fire. The flames spread fast through the crowd. By the time the fire department arrived, 37 people had burned alive, men, women, and children, their screams echoing down the river until morning. After that, the town cancelled the parade for good. The bridge was torn down, and the site became overgrown. But ever since then, locals say that if you stand near Main Street at midnight on Halloween, you can still hear the distant sound of drums and faint music floating through the fog. Most people don't believe it, but Emma Callahan did. She was a journalism student visiting her grandmother in Ashbury Hollow. Her grandmother always warned her, don't look outside after midnight on Halloween. If you hear the parade, you turn away. Emma thought it was just another ghost story, the kind small towns invented to keep kids from sneaking out. But this Halloween, she wanted to prove it was all nonsense. So, at 11:50 p.m., she set up her camera on the second-floor window facing Main Street. The air was thick with fog, the kind that swallows sound and light. The only noise came from a broken wind chime on the porch. She checked her watch, smirking. "Midnight parade," she whispered. "Let's see it." When the clock struck 12, the air changed. It was subtle at first, the faint beat of drums in the distance. Boom, 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 like footsteps in perfect rhythm. Then came the soft trill of flutes, and the faraway laughter of a crowd. Emma froze. The sound wasn't coming from her speakers. It was outside. She leaned closer to the window, pressing her hand against the cold glass. Down on Main Street, the fog began to move, swirling like something alive. Shapes emerged from the mist, first shadows, then figures, people. They marched slowly down the street, carrying lanterns that glowed with a dull orange light. Their clothes were old-fashioned, tattered suits, long dresses, masks made of scorched wood and cracked porcelain. Some wore half-melted costumes, their edges blackened. Their faces were pale and waxy, their eyes hollow and dark. And leading them was a tall man in a top hat, holding a staff topped with a flickering lantern. Emma's camera kept recording, the lens trembling as her hands shook. The parade moved in silence now, no cheering, no talking, just the rustle of fabric and the scrape of shoes on asphalt. But as they passed beneath her window, the tall man looked up right at her. His eyes were glowing embers beneath the brim of his hat. He raised his lantern slowly, the flame inside burning brighter until her entire room was filled with its orange light. Then every clock in the house stopped. The next thing Emma knew, she was standing in the middle of the street. The fog was so thick she could barely see her own hands. Her camera lay shattered beside her. Around her, the parade continued, marching silently past. She tried to scream, but her voice came out as a whisper. One of the women in the parade turned toward her. Half her face was melted, her smile wide and glassy. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "It's not your time yet." Emma stumbled backward, heart pounding, but the fog thickened, swallowing her whole. The tall man approached, lantern raised. "Every year," he said, his voice like gravel, "someone watches. And every year we need one more to lead." He reached out his hand. The air around her grew scorching hot. The sound of drums grew deafening. Then darkness. At sunrise, her grandmother found her front door open. Emma's camera was sitting on the porch, its screen frozen on a single frame, the image of the foggy street with a faint figure in the distance, holding a lantern. But Emma was gone. The police searched the woods and the nearby river, but found no trace. The only clue was a single burnt shoe near Main Street, and the faint smell of smoke that lingered in the air for days. A week later, the town restored Emma's camera footage. Most of it was static, but in the last few seconds, the fog parted just enough to show the parade again. Hundreds of figures marching slowly down the road. The tall man passed by the camera first, followed by dozens of others. And near the very end of the procession was Emma. Her eyes were black, her skin pale and cracked. She wore an old-fashioned dress, and in her hand, she held a small lantern that glowed faintly. The video ended with a whisper caught on the microphone. The parade must go on. Every Halloween since, Ashbury Hollow is silent after midnight. The streets are empty, the lights turned off. But sometimes, travelers passing through say they see lights moving in the fog, and hear the faint beat of distant drums. Those who look too long never make it home, because once you see the midnight parade, you don't just watch it, you join it. Every town has its Halloween legend, the one parents whisper to keep their kids from wandering too far after dark. In Raven's Hollow, that legend is the Pumpkin Man. They say he comes out only once a year, when the air turns cold and the pumpkins begin to rot in the fields. He doesn't speak. He doesn't chase. He just watches, waiting for someone foolish enough to stare back. No one really believed it anymore, except Clara Jensen. Clara was 17, restless, and tired of small-town superstitions. Every Halloween, her neighbors decorated their porches with jack-o'-lanterns and candles to keep the Pumpkin Man away. Clara thought it was ridiculous. Her friends joked that the whole thing started when some farmer decades ago went missing in the fields and people needed a story to explain it. But that year, the Halloween of 2019, things were different. That October was unusually cold. Frost gathered on the windows at night, and a strange fog rolled in from the woods. Clara's father owned one of the largest pumpkin farms in Raven's Hollow, and for the first time in years, the pumpkins had started to rot early, their orange skin turning black, their insides collapsing like deflated lungs. Her father said it was a fungus, but Clara couldn't ignore the feeling that the pumpkins were watching her. On Halloween night, while the town held its costume parade downtown, Clara decided to stay home. She sat on the porch with a blanket, scrolling through her phone, when she heard it, a slow creak from the barn. She assumed it was her dad checking the tractor, but when she called out, no one answered. The wind howled through the fields, carrying the smell of wet earth and decay. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped off the porch. The beam of light wobbled across the rows of pumpkins, each one slumped and splitting. The sound came again, that creaking, rhythmic, like someone rocking back and forth on a wooden chair. When she reached the barn, the doors were slightly open. The air inside was thick and heavy, and something dripped steadily from the rafters. She pointed the flashlight upward and screamed. Dozens of pumpkins hung from the ceiling by twine, their faces crudely carved, their insides hollowed out. Each one had a candle burning inside, though she hadn't lit them. Their glow was sickly and pulsing, like the heartbeat of something alive. Her flashlight flickered and went out. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, from the far corner, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, wet. "Dad." She called out, her voice trembling. No answer. The smell of rot grew stronger. Something moved between the hanging pumpkins, tall and human-shaped. When it stepped into the light of one of the lanterns, she saw it, a figure dressed in torn overalls and a tattered coat, its head a massive, rotting pumpkin. Two hollow eyes burned from inside the carved face. It tilted its head, the candlelight flickering through the cracks of its decayed grin. Clara stumbled backward, knocking over a bucket. The figure didn't move. It just watched her, breathing softly through the slits of its jack-o'-lantern mouth. Then, in a deep, muffled voice that seemed to come from the earth itself, it said, "You shouldn't have come here." Clara bolted, running through the barn doors into the field. The fog had thickened, swallowing everything beyond a few feet. She tripped over vines and rotting pumpkins, the stench clinging to her skin. Behind her, she heard the crunch of footsteps, slow, steady. Following Dot, she reached the fence at the edge of the field and looked back. The pumpkin man stood in the mist, barely visible except for the faint orange glow of his head. He didn't chase her. He just raised one hand, a long, twisted hand covered in vines, and pointed toward her house. When Clara turned, she saw lights flickering inside her home. Her father's truck was in the driveway. She ran toward the house, calling his name. The front door was open. Inside, every candle in the house had been lit. The flames flickered strangely, all bending toward the hallway, like something was drawing them. "Dad." No answer, only the faint sound of dripping water. She followed it to the kitchen, and froze. On the counter sat a single pumpkin, freshly carved, its eyes wide, its grin jagged and uneven. Inside, a small candle burned brightly. Carved into the back of the pumpkin in shaky, uneven letters were the words, "Clara's turn." She backed away, trembling. The front door slammed shut behind her. The lights went out, and from the darkness came the soft sound of footsteps entering the house. When the police arrived the next morning, the Jensen house was empty. No signs of struggle, just dozens of pumpkins lined neatly on the porch, each carved with different faces. One of them, the largest, wore Clara's scarf around its stem. They searched the fields for days, but never found her. Over the years, new rumors began to spread. Farmers whispered that if you drove past the Jensen property on Halloween night, you could still see a figure standing in the foggy field, tall, with a pumpkin for a head, the faint glow of fire flickering from within. Some say it's the pumpkin man himself. Others say it's Clara, cursed to replace him after seeing his face. Whatever the truth is, one thing never changes. Every Halloween, the pumpkins in Raven's Hollow still rot early. Their faces seem to grin wider as the night goes on. And if you listen closely, beneath the wind and the creak of the trees, you might hear a low, muffled whisper, drifting from the fields, "Your turn." Then silence, because in Raven's Hollow, once you see the pumpkin man, you become part of the harvest. There's a reason people in the small town of Hollow Creek lock their doors early on Halloween night. Every October 31st, when the air turns sharp and the moon hides behind clouds, the stories begin again, whispers of footsteps echoing down the old streets, of children who never came home after the locals call it the trick-or-treat murders, and though the police claimed the killer was caught long ago, no one really believes it. It all started in 1999, when Halloween fell on a stormy Sunday. The rain came down in silver sheets, turning the fallen leaves into a slick carpet that glowed under the dim streetlights. Families still went out, umbrellas in hand, because in Hollow Creek, Halloween was a tradition no one skipped. The houses along Maple Lane were decorated with pumpkins, orange string lights, and fake cobwebs that clung to the wet air. That's where 12-year-old Eli Turner and his little sister Abby began their night. Eli was dressed as a skeleton, his white painted face glowing faintly in the dark. Abby, just 8, wore a witch's hat too big for her head. Their mum had warned them to stay close, but Eli wanted to prove he was brave. "It's just stories," he said, kicking a pile of wet leaves. "There's no boogeyman." But as the night went on, the streets began to empty faster than usual. The storm got worse. One by one, the porch lights started to go out. By 9 p.m., only a few houses still had candy to give. That's when they saw him, a tall man in a tattered Scarecrow costume, standing at the end of the street. His mask was burlap, stitched into a jagged smile, and he was holding a pumpkin-shaped candy bucket. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, watching. "Maybe it's Mr. Darrell," Abby said, clutching her bag. "He dresses up every year." But Eli shook his head. Mr. Darrell's costume never looked like that. They turned to leave. But the man began to follow, slowly, step by step. His boots squelched in the mud, his head tilting unnaturally to one side. Eli told himself not to look back, but curiosity won. When he did, the Scarecrow was gone. They ran the rest of the way home that night. Their mother tucked them into bed and turned off the light. But sometime after midnight, Eli woke up to a soft thud against his window. He sat up, listening. Thud again. He pulled back the curtain, expecting a branch. Instead, he saw the Scarecrow standing in their yard, staring up at him. The rain had stopped. The moon had returned. The burlap mask gleamed in the light like wet flesh. Eli screamed for his mum. But when she rushed into the room, the yard was empty. She scolded him for watching scary movies and told him to sleep. But when morning came, there were muddy footprints under his window, large ones, leading toward the forest. That was the first year of the trick-or-treat murders. Every Halloween after that, another child disappeared. Sometimes it was 1, sometimes 2. Always between 8 and 10 p.m., and always someone claimed to have seen the Scarecrow man lurking near the last house they visited. The police found no evidence, just candy bags dropped in puddles, half filled and muddy, in 2006. The police announced they had caught the killer, a drifter named Harold Crane. He had been living in an abandoned farmhouse just outside of town, and inside they found children's shoes, masks, and candy wrappers. They said he confessed. They said it was over. But the killings stopped for only 1 year. On Halloween of 2008, 13-year-old Sophie Lane was trick-or-treating with her friends. Around 9:30, she stopped by the old bridge on Birch Street, where someone had placed a single lit pumpkin in the middle of the road. Inside the pumpkin was a note, one more for the harvest. Sophie was never seen again. The police searched for weeks but found nothing, no body, no sign of struggle, just her witch's broom lying by the bridge. The town fell into silence after that. No more decorations. The laughter of children disappeared from Hollow Creek. Years passed. The old houses began to crumble. The forests thickened. People moved away, chasing safety somewhere else. Only a few families remained, too poor or too stubborn to leave. Then came Halloween of 22 to Towel. Eli Turner, now 35, had returned to Hollow Creek after years away. He'd joined the police force in another town, but something kept calling him back. Guilt, maybe. He still remembered the Scarecrow that haunted his childhood, the night Abby vanished when he was 16. The police had blamed her disappearance on Harold Crane, too. But Eli had always known better. That Halloween night, he drove down the empty streets of Maple Lane, his headlights cutting through the fog. The houses were dark, lifeless. No kids, no laughter, just wind. Then, near the old church, he saw it, a faint orange glow. A single house still had its porch light on. Curious, he parked and walked up the cracked steps. The house was abandoned, windows shattered, wallpaper peeled, but on the porch sat a single pumpkin, its face carved into a wide, crooked smile. Inside, the flame danced, barely alive. Beneath it lay a note. It read, "Welcome home, Eli." His heart froze. He drew his gun and stepped inside. The floorboards creaked. The smell of damp rot filled the air. In the living room, dozens of pumpkins lined the walls, each one carved with a different child's name. Their candles flickered weakly, casting long, shifting shadows. And then he heard it, the slow scrape of boots behind him. He turned. The Scarecrow stood there, taller than he remembered, its mask frayed but unmistakable. "It's been a long time," the voice rasped from behind the burlap. "You left me waiting." Eli aimed his gun. "You're not real," he whispered. The Scarecrow tilted its head. "Neither are they." The pumpkins began to flicker faster, their flames turning blue. From the shadows, small figures emerged, children pale and silent, their eyes hollow, black pits. Abby was among them. She stepped forward, her face expressionless. "You said you'd come back for me," she murmured. Eli dropped his gun. Abby, but her smile was wrong, wide, cracked, stretching too far. "It's time to finish the harvest," she whispered. The lights went out. Neighbors swore. They heard screams that night echoing across Hollow Creek. The next morning, Eli's patrol car was found abandoned near the church. His badge was lying on the porch of the old house, and beside it sat 2 pumpkins, one carved with his name, and one with Abby's. The town tried to move on. They always did, but each Halloween, a few brave kids still claimed to see a Scarecrow figure standing at the end of Maple Lane, waiting with a pumpkin bucket in hand. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, You can hear faint whispers carried through the leaves, children laughing, and a man's voice saying softly, "Trick or treat," and no one ever answers. There's an old house at the edge of Birch Hollow Road in the small town of Derry Falls, a place so forgotten that even the trick-or-treaters know to avoid it. The house stands crooked beneath a dying oak tree, its windows covered in grime, its porch swallowed by years of rot. Every Halloween, someone dares someone else to walk up the steps and knock on the door, and every year, no one ever does. At least, not since the Henderson family vanished. Back in 1987, the Hendersons were the kind of people who loved Halloween more than anyone else in town. They decorated their lawn with hand-carved pumpkins, ghostly sheets, and eerie candlelight that glowed deep into the night. Kids lined up for their candy because Mrs. Henderson always gave full-size chocolate bars. But one Halloween night, something changed. Their lights stayed on long after midnight. The candles still burned when the morning came. The pumpkins still smiled their crooked smiles, but the Hendersons were gone. No one ever saw them again. Over the years, stories grew like weeds. Some said the house was cursed, that whoever entered it on Halloween night would never come back out. Others claimed that if you listened closely, you could still hear the sound of laughter inside, faint and muffled, as if trapped between the walls. It was this legend that drew a group of teenagers, Tyler, Jess, Brandon, and me at the old house one cold Halloween evening. The sky was bruised purple with fog creeping through the trees. The air smelled like burnt leaves and distant bonfires. Tyler, the ringleader, was filming on his phone. "Come on, it's just an old house," he said, flashing a cocky grin. "We'll knock, say hello, and leave. Easy views." They crossed the road, their shoes crunching on the brittle leaves. The house loomed ahead, taller and darker than they expected. Each step up the porch made the boards groan under their weight. Mia hesitated. "It feels wrong," she whispered, "like we're not supposed to be here." Brandon laughed, tossing a small rock against the wall. "Relax, it's just wood and dust." But when Tyler reached out and knocked on the door, everything changed. The sound echoed unnaturally too loud to hollow us if it was swallowed by something vast inside. After a moment, the door creaked open by itself. The smell that poured out was thick and sour, like damp earth and something dead beneath it. They stepped inside. The house was untouched, frozen in time. Cobwebs hung like lace curtains, and dust coated everything. On the table near the window, 4 bowls of candy still settled and hardened, but perfectly arranged. A carved pumpkin rested nearby, its candle flickering though no one had lit it. "That's impossible," Jess murmured. The others said nothing. They just watched the candle burn, its flame dancing like it was breathing. Then came the laughter. It was faint at first, a child's giggle, echoing from somewhere upstairs. Mia froze. "Did you hear that?" Tyler nodded, filming as the sound came again, closer this time, joined by the rustle of small feet on old wood. They followed the noise up the staircase, each step creaking louder than the last. Halfway up, Brandon's flashlight flickered, revealing dozens of framed photographs on the wall. Every picture showed the Henderson family smiling on Halloween night, except for one detail. In each photo, the background window showed figures watching from inside. When they reached the landing, the laughter stopped. The air grew heavy, suffocating. A faint glow seeped from the room at the end of the hall. They followed it, hearts pounding. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the walls were covered in children's drawings, stick figures holding hands beneath a black sky. But every single figure had its face scribbled out. Suddenly, Tyler's camera cut to static. Then the whispering began, soft. Urgent voices surrounded them, speaking in tones too low to understand. Mia turned toward the corner and gasped. A figure was standing there, a man in an old pumpkin mask, still and silent. He was holding a bowl of candy, just like the ones downstairs. The mask's carved mouth seemed to curl upward as he stepped forward. "Trick or treat," he said in a voice that didn't sound human. The lights flickered, and Jess screamed. The figure moved impossibly fast, vanishing into the dark as cold air rushed through the room. Brandon turned to run, but the hallway behind them was gone, replaced by an endless corridor of doors. Each door slowly creaked open to reveal black, empty rooms. Somewhere inside that blackness, something moved. They ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, but the front door wasn't there anymore. The house was shifting, stretching. The air filled with distant laughter again, and the smell of burning pumpkins. Tyler dropped his phone as the walls pulsed like they were alive. "Get out," he shouted. But the house had other plans. Mia was the first to vanish. 1 second she was beside him, the next she was gone, her scream echoing through the floorboards. Jess stumbled backward, her flashlight shaking, catching glimpses of pale faces staring from the shadows. The Henderson, their eyes were empty sockets, their mouths frozen in wide grins. They reached out silently, their hands stretching through the dark like smoke. Brandon swung his flashlight wildly, yelling for help, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the pumpkin-masked man standing at the doorway, whispering, "Now you're part of the tradition." When the sun rose the next morning, the house on Birch Hollow Road was quiet again. The door was closed, the porch empty, but if you looked closely through the dusty windows, you'd see new bowls of candy on the tableland for fresh pumpkins. Glowing faintly in the corner, their carved faces eerily familiar. That Halloween, the neighborhood kids noticed something new. When they passed the old house, they could hear laughter drifting through the cracks, teenage voices mixed with something older. And if you dared to walk too close, you might just see faces in the window, staring back. The legend says the house chooses new guests every 30 years. And this year, the pumpkins burned brighter than ever, because the Hendersons weren't alone anymore. And on Birch Hollow Road, Halloween never ends. There's something different about Halloween in small-town America. When the sun dips behind the trees and the air turns cold enough to sting your lungs, you can almost feel the night breathe. The laughter of children fades into the wind, and for a few short hours, the world feels thin. That was the kind of night Sheriff Dalton remembered for the rest of his life. Halloween, 1994. Willow Bend, Kentucky. Population 1,102. Dalton had been sheriff there for 27 years. He'd seen his fair share of odd things: teens vandalizing graveyards, drunk farmers mistaking deer for burglars, the usual. But that Halloween night felt wrong. The air had that heavy stillness before a storm, even though the sky was clear. The moon looked too close. The woods were too quiet. Dalton had just finished his patrol around 10:45 p.m. Most kids were home by then, lights off, candy bowls empty. The town square was dark, the jack-o'-lanterns flickering in their final hours. He drove down Pine Hollow Road, the outskirts of town, where houses were far apart and shadows seemed to linger longer. That's where he saw him, a small figure standing at the edge of the road. The kid couldn't have been more than 10. He wore a ghost costume, just a white sheet with 2 eye holes dragging at his feet. In his right hand, he held a plastic orange bucket, empty. Dalton slowed the cruiser, rolled down the window. "You okay, kid?" He called out. The boy didn't answer, didn't move. Trick or treat's over, you know. You lost. Still nothing. Just the quiet flutter of the sheet in the wind. Dalton sighed. Probably one of the Miller boys playing a prank again. He got out of the car, boots crunching on gravel. As he approached, the boy turned his head, slow, unnatural, as though the sound reached him from underwater. Dalton knelt to his level. "Son, do you need a ride home?" That's when he noticed something strange. The sheet wasn't white anymore. Up close, it looked yellowed, old, like linen pulled from an attic trunk, and the smell faint, but sharp like dirt after rain. He hesitated. "Hey, come on now. You're freezing out here." The boy tilted his head again, and the bucket fell from his hand, rolling across the dirt. Inside was nothing. No candy, no wrappers. Just a small, folded piece of paper. Dalton picked it up. It was brittle, like parchment. Scrawled across it, in faded ink, were 3 words, "Don't follow me." When Dalton looked up, the boy was gone, just gone. The field beside the road was empty, the tree line dark and still. Dalton turned in a slow circle, flashlight sweeping across the field. Nothing but wind and grass. No footprints. His heart thudded in his chest. He could feel his pulse in his ears, then thunk. Something hit the roof of his cruiser. He spun around. The boy was standing on the other side of the car now, sheet rippling in the wind. Dalton's voice shook. "Kid, that's enough." The figure started walking toward him, slow, dragging steps. Dalton shined his flashlight directly into the eye holes. There was nothing beneath, just darkness. Dalton stumbled backward, fumbling for his gun, but the light flickered once, twice, and went out completely. The night was pitch black. All he could hear was breathing, and then a whisper, a child's voice, hollow and far away. "It's your turn." Dalton raised his weapon blindly, voice breaking. "Stay back." Silence. Then, from behind him, a whisper right at his ear. "Trick or treat." He spun around, but the space was empty. Just fog rolling low over the dirt. The next moment, everything went dark. He woke up in his cruiser, headlights off, engine running, radio hissing, static. His watch read 11:38 p.m. The passenger door was open. His flashlight was gone. Dalton sat there, frozen, trying to make sense of what happened. It had to be exhaustion, maybe low blood sugar. He checked the road. No one. The bucket still lay there in the dirt, the paper gone. He drove home that night, hands shaking on the wheel, but he couldn't stop thinking about that voice. 2 days later, a farmer named Earl Chambers called the sheriff's office, said he'd found something strange in his field. Out by the old cemetery fence, Dalton drove out there, the same road, the same fog. Earl was pale when he met him. "Sheriff, I don't know how else to say this. It's a grave. A new one. The mound of earth was fresh, marked by an old wooden cross. But what made Dalton's stomach twist was what lay beside it. A small, orange plastic bucket. And on the cross, nailed through with a rusted nail, was that same folded paper. This time, the words were different. I told you not to follow. Dalton didn't sleep for days. He started digging through town records, old case files, anything mentioning a missing child. He found something from 1954, a newspaper clipping. Headline: Local boy vanishes on Halloween night. Body never found. The boy's name was Caleb Harper, age 10. Last seen wearing a homemade ghost costume and carrying an orange candy bucket. Dalton stared at the photo, a sepia-toned image of a smiling kid with dark eyes. The same height, the same posture. His heart went cold. The next Halloween, Dalton didn't patrol. He stayed home, porch light off, blinds drawn. But as the clock neared midnight, the phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick it up. The line was filled with static, faint, distant. Then a child's voice. "Sheriff." Dalton froze. "You didn't follow me this time." The voice was calm, sad, almost. Dalton swallowed hard. "Who is this?" Static crackled. "You forgot my candy." The line went dead. When deputies arrived at Dalton's house the next morning, they found the phone still in his hand. The line had been cut. Outside, sitting neatly on the porch, was a wooden coffin, child-sized, perfectly polished. Carved into the lid, Dalton. But the sheriff was gone. No forced entry. No struggle, just a faint trail of dirt leading away from the porch. Toward the woods months later, hunters found his cruiser deep in the trees. Inside, the seats were covered in a thin layer of dust. On the passenger seat sat an orange bucket, cracked and faded. Next to it, Dalton's badge, narrator low, reflective tone. The town of Willow Bend doesn't talk about Sheriff Dalton anymore. Every Halloween, the new sheriff closes the road by the cemetery. Locals know better than to drive through after dark. But sometimes, just sometimes, a driver passing through sees a small figure on the roadside. A boy in a ghost costume, holding a bucket, and if you slow down, he'll lift the sheet. Just enough for you to see a smile that's not supposed to be there then. In the distance, you'll hear a voice, soft, tired, but always the same. "It's your turn." Sound of wind rising, faint static returns. Then a slow heartbeat beneath the narrator's voice. Some say the boy was a spirit trapped between worlds, a trick-or-treater who never made it home. Others think he's something older, a collector who walks every Halloween looking for names to carve into his coffin. But one thing's certain: every soul that meets him vanishes, and a new name appears on that old wooden cross by the cemetery. Last year, they say the cross had 2 names. This year, there are 3. And if you drive down Pine Hollow Road tonight, right around midnight, you might see him too. Just don't stop. Don't roll down your window. And whatever you do, don't follow him. Soft static. Then silence. That was the trick-or-treater who never left. If you enjoyed tonight's story, make sure to subscribe to Wrong Turn Horror and tap the bell, because next time, we're heading into another real small-town nightmare from America's haunted heartland. Until then, stay safe, stay scared, and remember the wrong turn is never far away. Willow Creek had always looked like the kind of town you'd find on an old Halloween postcard. Rows of maple trees, candy wrappers stuck in gutters, porches glowing orange beneath the chill of late October. Kids in plastic masks would dart between houses, their laughter echoing against the dark woods that surrounded the town. But if you ever walked all the way down Birchwood Lane, past the cracked sidewalk, the leaning mailboxes, and the rusted street light that flickered like it was breathing, you'd find one house that never joined the holiday. Mrs. Ellison's house, a tall, peeling Victorian with windows like blind eyes and a roofline that sagged beneath decades of silence. Every Halloween, the rest of the town would light their pumpkins and hang fake cobwebs. But Mrs. Ellison's porch stayed dark. No candy, no laughter, just a single rocking chair that sometimes moved when no wind was blowing. No one had seen her in years. That Halloween, 5 friends decided to change that. They were only 13, hearts full of candy and courage. Eli, the youngest, his sister, Maddie, their loud-mouthed friend, Troy, quiet Sarah, and Ben, who always filmed everything on his old camcorder. The night was perfect, fog rising from the forest, the moon hanging low and yellow like a watchful eye. They'd already filled their bags and were halfway through, a sugar high when Troy grinned and pointed down Birchwood Lane. Bet. None of you have the guts to trick or treat at the witch's house. Maddie rolled her eyes. Mrs. Ellison isn't a witch. Then why's her light always off? He teased. Maybe she's waiting for someone brave enough. Ben kept the camera steady. We could film it for the Halloween challenge. Last porch light of Willow Creek. The others laughed. But Eli just stared at the distant house. Even from here he could see it tall, grey, still, like a grave that never forgot. Fine, he said quietly. I'll go. They walked together until the sounds of the town faded behind them. Every step felt heavier. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of damp wood and iron. When they reached the gate, its hinges wailed like something in pain. The porch loomed above them, paint-chipped, windows clouded, a pumpkin sitting in shadow, except no one had carved pumpkins here in years. Look, Maddie whispered. That wasn't there before. The pumpkin's face was uneven, carved in a crooked grin. A candle flickered inside, though no one had lit it. Ben zoomed in with his camera. Guys, that's insane. It's actually glowing. Eli took a step forward. Don't, Sarah hissed, but he was already climbing the steps. Each board creaked beneath his sneakers. The air felt heavy, to still like the world had paused to watch. He reached the pumpkin. The candlelight danced across his face. Then, from inside the house, a voice, a whisper, drifted through the door. You're just. In time, Eli froze. Mrs. Ellison, he called. The door opened an inch. The smell that came out wasn't the smell of an old house. It was sweet, rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. Come in, the voice said softly. Behind him, his friends laughed nervously. Troy cupped his hands. Go on, man. Say, trick or treat. Eli turned back, heart pounding. Trick or treat, he said. The door opened wider, slow, aching hinges. A hand reached out, thin, pale, shaking, and dropped something into his bag. It was cold, heavier than candy. Eli looked down. It wasn't wrapped. It was a small, brownish lump, a tooth. He gasped, dropping the bag. What the but, when he looked up again, the door had closed. From the gate, the others called his name. No answer. Ben stopped recording. He's messing with us. They waited 5 minutes, then 10. The wind began to rise, carrying whispers through the trees. Maddie's eyes filled with tears. Eli, come on, this isn't funny. Troy, trying to look brave, climbed halfway up the porch. The pumpkin light flickered brighter than went out. Darkness swallowed the house. Troy stumbled back. Nope, I'm not doing this. They ran, bags spilling candy, leaves chasing their feet, and didn't stop until they reached the next street. When they turned around, Birchwood Lane was empty. The next morning, the sheriff found Eli's candy bag at the gate. Inside were crushed sweets, and that single human tooth. The porch light burned all day, though the electricity to the house had been shut off for nearly a decade. Maddie couldn't sleep that night. The image of the house haunted her dreams, that flickering grin, her brother's small figure vanishing into the dark dot at 2 a.m. She heard tapping on her window. 3 soft knocks. She pulled the curtain aside. Nothing but fog, but on the glass, drawn in condensation, was a crooked smile. The same one from the pumpkin. She screamed. Her parents rushed in, turned on the lights, and froze. There, sitting on the dresser, was a pumpkin, freshly carved, flickering with a candle that hadn't been lit. Its face was Eli's. The town of Willow Creek tried to make sense of it. The police searched the woods, dredged the creek, questioned everyone who'd ever known Mrs. Ellison, but the house remained empty. No footprints, no signs of life, except one, a single pumpkin on the porch, its candle always burning, no matter the weather. Weeks later, Ben gathered the courage to watch the footage from that night. His hands shook as he pressed play. The camera followed Eli up the steps, the pumpkin glowing, the door opening, then static. He fast-forwarded. At 11:57 p.m., the screen cleared again. The porch was empty. The camera tilted, as if someone else were holding it now. It moved closer to the lens until a single face filled the frame. Eli's smiling, that same crooked pumpkin grin. Then darkness. Ben smashed the camera. Years passed. The friends moved away. Maddie never celebrated Halloween again, but every October 31st, at exactly 9 p.m., the porch light on Birchwood Lane flickered on by itself, and sometimes neighbors swore it. They saw a small figure standing there, holding a candy bag, waiting. It was 5 Halloweens later when Maddie came back. She was 20 now, visiting her parents for the weekend. The town had changed. New stores, new faces. But Birchwood Lane looked exactly the same that night, as the trick-or-treaters filled the streets. She found herself walking toward the house. The gate creaked open like it remembered her. The porch was covered in fallen leaves, and that same pumpkin sat there, its candle still burning after 5 years. Her heart raced. "Eli," she whispered. The door creaked open. Inside, the house smelled of wax and earth. Dust motes floated through the moonlight. Furniture covered in sheets. She stepped inside. "Eli, if you're here, I'm sorry." Something moved upstairs, slow, dragging steps. She followed. Each stair groaned beneath her feet. The hallway was lined with photographs, old black and white pictures of children holding pumpkins. Their faces all looked eerily similar. Wide eyes, crooked smiles. At the end of the hall, a door was half open. Light flickered from within. Maddie pushed it open and gasped. The room was filled with pumpkins. Dozens of them, stacked in rows, each carved with a child's face. In the center of the room sat the rocking chair, and in it, Eli Dot, or what was left of him. His skin was pale, waxy, his eyes hollow and glassy. A candle flickered inside his open mouth. He smiled. "You came back," Maddie screamed. The house seemed to breathe, the walls pulsing with orange light. Behind her, the door slammed shut. Neighbors found the house burning just before dawn. They never found Maddie, but when the smoke cleared, one thing survived the fire: a single pumpkin on the porch, glowing bright. Inside its carved grin were two faces, Eli's and Maddie's. Since that night, the people of Willow Creek have a rule. On Halloween, when the trick-or-treaters roam the streets and the air smells of smoke and candy, no one goes near Birchwood Lane, because sometimes, when the fog is thick enough, you can see that old house again, standing whole and proud, and a small boy waiting on the steps, smiling beneath the orange light. If you're foolish enough to walk closer, the porch light will flicker on, and you'll hear a voice whisper, "You're just in time," and then the candle will blow out. Soft fading wind, creaking wood, music dissolves into silence. Some say it's just a legend, a story to keep kids away from abandoned houses. But others remember the Ellisons, a family who lost their son in 1953 and were never the same. Mrs. Ellison spent the rest of her life carving pumpkins that looked like him, until one Halloween she vanished too. Maybe she found a way to keep her son close. Maybe she's still waiting for company. So if you ever see a lonely porch light burning at the edge of town, don't go knocking, because in Willow Creek, the pumpkins don't just glow. They remember.